All right, let's just say there's a missionary, okay? After seeing 2,000 years of missions for missionaries, they go into Egypt, they go into Rome. They're going into, they're going into small compounds, but their target is Egypt, Rome, Greece, Italy, Senegal, Scotland, Britain, wherever there's a strong civilization, and Spain and all this stuff. The missionary is a contractor. He's a trader, essentially. So it's a group of men who are traders and act as an army, an independent army. So say you have an internal fight with your own nation. And say there's multiple groups having a war, a build-up, a civil war, a prepping for a war, where people actually have to start prepping. Like they have the instinct that something horrible is about to happen. They begin to prep and stockpile food and weapons and shit. They know it's happening, they don't know how it's going to happen. That the American civilization is about to have a civil war, which will lead to a war. But it will not be like the other missions where the missionaries come in and say, well, you're having an internal struggle with the bankers and the military industrial complex. We're going to go in, infiltrate slowly, dissolve it, make subcontractors like Lockheed Martin, the top 12 contractors, who act as missionaries. They do sneaky shit where they act as a patriot, but they're traitors, and they undermine the United States military. And then they go in as a missionary and go to Cleopatra, who's a traitor, because she's not African. She marries into the black royalty. She dissolves it accidentally because she's not part of the group. So there's always an internal person who's not part of it. They go to that weak link. Because even if you say someone's inbred, if you say they're not, okay, there's a royalty in every civilization. It's a system of families. There's nothing you can do about that, and who gives a shit? Because most of the people in the civilization are stupid and peasants. They get opportunities, they vary from property to property, tax to tax. They inquire about more productivity and how to get consumption. But when you have a missionary who creates a war, where they go into America, say we want to dissolve its assets, they're not paying attention. Let's give them a false flag. Undermining the FBI, going into the CIA, going into all the MIT, all the universities, all the large corporations, the banks, infiltrate for, 100 years, 200 years, 5. Sit there and just wait for opportunities to come to take something from their own group. Pirates. Internal pirates. Missionaries are like pirates. They lie. When they teach you in school, they say, well, this is a group that's going to come in and teach your kids how to speak English. Actually, it's not. They are missionaries acting on behalf of someone who's weak, cannot take care of a civilization anymore, goes to the help of a contractor who has infiltrated the entire system of the civilization to take from it. Thieves, gang members. And then they politically ostracize the poor and the middle class and say, you need to pick a side. Are you with us or are you against us? If you're with us, we have to go into each community, weed out people who are defense, okay, activists, people who are weak, people who are poor and stupid, women and children. The people that are neglected in society. Go into those groups, pressure them to participate or be a victim, to be commodified. Make a commodity out of the human body, mimic every slave intervention, okay, which means the slaves are brought into a country to do intervention to help them build their culture up. The slave has no understanding that they're a commodity. That in fact, when you take the slaves in each civilization, you take the slave, it's a commodity. don't take it personal, because then you have a better chance to survive and fight back. You're a commodity. How many of you are going to survive? Okay? You get to the coast, they buy you wholesale, like when they distribute goods from China. They have commodified the workforce of China. They take the products to a shipping network, the shipping containers. These are union people, these are the mob, these are gang members. The shippers are the scariest, probably the most fucked up and most powerful people on the planet. One of the most powerful people. They're shipping the cargo of the slaves, the network that distributes wealth. I mean, this goes back to even the Spanish Inquisition, the transatlantic slave trade, the Roman Catholic Church, the takeover of Britain and Germany. It's always the same bullshit. The missionary comes in.
Well, let me just point out, actually today the same thing has happened. Amazon is the shipper. Amazon's real point is a shipper. They're not as much of a retail as they're a shipper. Go ahead. I just wanted to help you out there.
All right. So unwillingly, so
that's a good point.
All right. So the population gets bought and sold. It can happen in all kinds of offensive ways. So let's go into Amazon. Amazon goes into the neighborhood and extracts wealth. What they do is they pressure the civilian population out of exchange, out of capital exchange, product exchange, manufacturing, assembling. So if you are a person that makes something, like say you are a coffee shop and you have coffee that you import by yourself, and this is your coffee shop, and then Starbucks comes in and says, I'm going to buy that. If you're a hardware store, and we all remember that classic hardware store where you know the guy, you know his family, his son comes in and he works sometimes. He has 3 people working for him. It's a small place. You buy your hammer and your drill. There's 5 aisles at the most. Usually,
I don't think you ever knew that.
No, usually 3. I used to go to the hardware store on the west side. Yeah, I used to go to the hardware store. I ran errands. I used to go there for my grandfather. Right, I picked up stuff with him, nails or whatever. He did carpentry. Okay, whatever. It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I remember. So they get commodified and sold, like the transatlantic slave trade, like the coastal Nile River Valley, where they're doing lots of large exchanges with Asia and Europe. They're basically doing online offshore trading, getting the product from Africa, the gold, the silk, the goods, the spices, the food, shipping it into Asia and China, getting metals, exchanging minerals. This is the oldest thing. This is like the oldest shit in the world. It's not that big of a deal. But now, it's when the missionary contractor fucking comes in and is a pirate. A systematic Jesuit Catholic piece of shit comes in and says, let's train our boys in South America to be programmers, military, private eyes, the military, teachers, the intellectuals. We will teach them how to be all of those characters that these people have in their silly little world. So some private, like Milton Friedman, Disaster Capitalism, where he comes in, he goes into South America, into Russia, he privatizes everything. This is like a mission. Then he has to get the backing of the missionary who's a pirate and says, look, we're going in and we're taking everything. They're going to fucking have a disaster for 10 years. They'll have to, if they survive 20 years, there'll be capitalism. So you get like 20 years of poverty, starving, warfare, and then you get capitalism, where basically you're consuming the product of the missionary. You forfeited your right to take care of yourself because you weren't strong enough, but you didn't see it coming. My point is this. If we see that this is a pattern of behavior of the European pirate, Even other cultures, the Asians, the Arabs, the Africans, they've all done it on some level differently. For instance, if the Spanish go into South America and Mexico, the only way that they can take over is that they contract themselves to a weaker group. So the group, they have to have infighting. The one ingredient to taking over a civilization is that they're fighting. They can either create the fighting or it's just a coincidence and an opportunity. So you have multiple tribes of indigenous people of the population fighting each other in Mexico and South America. Spain comes in as a virus and says to the weaker group, show me where the gold is. I will help you defend yourself against the hierarchy. Oh, wow. The peasants are like, woohoo, I'm going to get a new red or white car. Well, you got your red and white car, but at the expense of everyone else, including the other nations that traded with us, including the people that depended on the next state. So if you make a product in Michigan and you sell it to people in California, your civilization stays intact. Once the missionary comes in with all their propaganda about cheap labor overseas. See, what the white race doesn't get is that nobody really needs them for anything. But now, because they can't cooperate with each other, it has nothing to do with blacks and immigrants. The whites could never work together unless they were takers, you see? And so now it's happening on a level and a scale. It makes the Spanish Inquisition look like practice. I mean, you have invisible weapons penetrating your property and hitting the person you love. The only way that it could even... the only way that this could go on is that there's a missionary corrupt group of pirates that have like Infraguard, Community Watch, the Department of Defense, NSA, Lockheed Martin, General Electric, going into each group.
No, you shouldn't sleep in the office all the time because they know where you are.
Right.
I
should change
smarter,
it. Change.
You move around.
I used to do that when I got shot at.
Why are you so dumb now?
I use the YouTube channels to block the remote neural monitoring commands and questions. They do like a question answer for 24 hours a day. Tell us about this. Who is that? How are you? Do you agree with this? Tell me this. Tell me that. And then all the onslaught of whatever that is. There's millions of us going through it.
Did you have any coffee?
No. But, okay, now I'm going to stop. So, it is a pattern. So once you see it's a pattern, it's the missionary. Okay, you can have an authentic satellite company. If the pirates go in and infiltrate the satellite companies, corrupt it, make it. This is actually, we already knew all this, but Dr. Catherine Horton really explains it well. You know, there's nothing wrong with liberal politics. They have the think tanks that break all this shit down. And if if you're targeted, try to go into other areas to figure out how to stop this. Naomi Klein, she is a thoughtful investigator of all of these horrible, traumatizing big events, like all these wars. These wars are manufactured theft. And then a psychological trauma, you know, the Nazi-German exchange of trauma and slavery, which I think is the definitive tactic of the German, is psychological warfare and sexual abuse at a young age, and then even infiltrating the men and the women, using sex and trauma and violence to break the morale of the group. I think this is authentically German. I think they all do it, but I think the Germans really, even before World War II, because they had to conquer each other. And when they conquer each other, that's why you see this witch hunt, where they periodically take an idea like the Christian missionary, where the whites gather the data of the Arabs and the Africans and say, well, we understand the one Son of God the universe is God, the sun is God, whatever they want to get into. And then they become fanatical about it because it's so interesting, but in an aggressive way. So you tell a story and you say, well, in Egypt, we believe in the sun god. And we've all agreed that we get crops and we're here, we get to live and play and build and be masons. And being a mason just means you build a civilization. It doesn't mean you're a satanic, masturbating pedophile. It means that you have mastered the art of geometry, science, and physics, and all those things are important for a civilization. The blacks master it, the whites take it and pervert it. It doesn't matter that you want to believe that you can blame the black race. You cannot. Okay? But when you see the whites using Christianity, they slaughter millions of people on behalf of God. So the missionary of the Christian faith slaughtered and has broken the spirit of millions of people globally to conform to this ideology that actually comes from Egypt, and some Israeli Zionist Christian, Bethlehem, this Mediterranean black group, these blacks that are the Christians of the world, these variations on one God, okay? A monolithic God. Thank you. It's a monolithic God, one God. It's not diverse, but the New World Order, because this is when it gets creepy. If you're going to have a New World Order, you need one God, right? You need one form of money, one form of this, one idea, one hive mind. And imagine the whole planet talking to each other and not opening their mouths. It is a fucking nightmare, okay?